right. Thanks, Adrian. Much appreciated. We love you. Not like that. Well, unless it is like that. Awesome. Awesome. All right. Thank you all for coming. Welcome to DerbyCon. You have chosen to come to speak. Come sit in track one for If It Fits, It Ships. I mean, sniffs. And we're going to talk about some of my adventures doing some WarShipping. But first, who is this joker in front of the room that got invited to come speak at DerbyCon? I am a penetration tester and hardware hacker at a very small boutique pen testing firm called InGuardians. I love those guys. I'm also a certified SANS instructor where I teach their wireless class, Security 617, penetration testing and defending wireless networks. Also a member of the Paul's Security Weekly crew, the formerly Paul.com Security Weekly podcast, now Paul's Security Weekly podcast. Yeah, don't ask. There was money and copyright issues involved. And it was Paul and I that started the podcast. We're pushing 7 years ago, and it's been a weekly thing from there on. And I'm also an extra class ham radio operator with my call sign of KB1TNF, Kilo Bravo 1, Tango November Foxtrot, or if you think you want to be funny, it's Kevin Bacon 1, that's not funny. All right, so let's talk about some of this this whole WarShipping stuff. We were having a discussion in the office, and we're all virtual, so it was the office, otherwise known as the IRC channel, where we all hang out all day. We were talking about potentially delivering a Wi-Fi hacking platform to one of our customers. And then we thought about this, well, if we're going to do this as ethical pen testers, why can't someone else who is less than ethical do something very similar, so permission or otherwise? We had some things that we wanted to accomplish as part of this. We wanted to be able to know when he had arrived at the appropriate location or very close. We wanted to know when specific networks were in range so that we could potentially launch attacks, make sure that we were attacking the right folks. One, to deal with the issues of how long does it take to get there, and maybe what can we do when it's in transit. Okay, so let's start talking about some of this. So, thinking about this a little differently, okay, my wife loves this slide, no. This whole thing about sort of doing Wi-Fi type of attacks has been done. So it's not that this is terribly different, but some of the output ended up being a little bit different, and we took a different set of, a different approach to some of the challenges that we've seen. So this whole Wi-Fi discovery and attack thing has been done. War airplaning, ballooning, biking, walking, you name it. In fact, this whole land-based shipping carrier has actually been done. Dave Maynor and Robert Graham did this at DEF CON 16. It was right after the iPhone 1 came out. And they actually jailbroke their iPhone and shipped this in the mail. The problem is that their results ended up being kind of odd because on their way from the airport to the Riviera for DEF CON, they actually lost the phone in the cab. So, no, I didn't lose my device in a cab. We actually potentially have the end results from this type of stuff. So, wanted to definitely give credit to Robert Graham and Dave Maynor for some of their works doing some of this this WarShipping stuff. But again, I took a little bit different approach to some of these things. All right, so let's think about sort of what the end game is. We want to get a device into a facility to discover information about their wireless networks and potentially deliver attacks. We want this device to be there to do something for a certain period of time. So if this is a fairly large sort of facility, we're often going to find that all of the packages get delivered to one spot, and then their internal mail room now holds onto the packages and then distributes from within the company. And that's actually potentially good for us. Now we're going to get the package delivered. It's going to sit there for maybe 1 or 2 days inside of a facility that has those wireless networks in the time where they're going to be taking this and delivering these offbound. Thanks, Dave. Good, I was thirsty anyways. No, it's not. Man, there's another one in there. It's going to come up later. Whew. Thanks, Dave. I'll pay you back, brother. All right. So we can now potentially extend the time for the length that this package will sit in the mailroom. Send it to a person who doesn't exist. So by virtue of that, send it to a person that doesn't exist, and the company is going to sit in the mailroom maybe for a couple of days till they figure out that this person doesn't work here, and then maybe they ship it back to us. Awesome. Now we can potentially recover some data. Maybe we send it to someone who's on vacation, so it gets delivered to their office while they're on vacation, and it sits in their office for a week, 2 weeks, continually gathering information, potentially launching attacks against that type of stuff. Some other type of things, maybe we deliver this to someone that has inconveniently just been terminated. Maybe they post on Twitter, hey, I just got fired, or I just left my job today. You ship it to them, and then maybe it takes a while for the mailroom to get that routed to someone else. Okay. Some other things to think about is that maybe we have someone that we want to attack that is on the path of one of the shipping routes, and we don't actually ship it to the company, but we send it to a UPS or FedEx facility that is very close to the company where we can observe that. So maybe it's along one of the shipping routes. We don't even need to send it to the victim company. They have no idea that this thing ends up in their environment, but we ship it past them. And that becomes kind of interesting because we can potentially have multiple paths. And then, of course, if we end up maybe making some mistakes in shipping or some things get changed, what happens when this gets put on an airplane as opposed to doing ground transport? So that also becomes some pretty different changes. See, I told you it was coming. All right. All right, so yeah, the aircraft may be some specific issues given that the FAA and weather and all that type of stuff are going to change flight paths. So that also may be interesting as well. Now, there's also some other challenges about doing electronics on airplanes. Yeah. All right, so great. Surrender the catnip, nice and easy, my friend. All right, so who are some of the potential victims for a war-shipping attack? So one, the recipient, we're going to send it to a victim and have it be in their facility. We could send it past them in a truck or a local delivery, or just ship it cross-country a couple times and see what we can find, or the shipping companies themselves. That might be kind of interesting. Now, do they have Wi-Fi in some of their facilities and local distribution places, in those centralized places? So now we potentially are shipping some Wi-Fi devices through a company that is, we're specifying which carrier we use and potentially launch attacks against them. Okay. We've got a couple of different options for shipping companies. Here in the US, there's some of the big ones, FedEx, UPS, United States Postal Service, DHL. Maybe we're going to be pen testing a courier service in one of the large cities. So now we can potentially do last mile for some of the courier services as well. And we're going to end up with those packages in their facilities because they're doing the transport for us. So that's one potential attack target for us. Okay. When we start specifically talking about ground transportation, that last mile is all sorts of fun. That FedEx truck that drives around your neighborhood and drops off packages, maybe now you're attacking a whole bunch of networks in residential areas and or in office parks and some of those types of things. So that slow sort of last mile type of stuff that stops frequently, that can have some extra fun stuff for us. Okay. We can also potentially ship this between two places. Being able to potentially find someone in transit. Maybe we are able to determine that one of the frequent shipping paths that one of the carriers uses goes by our facility, high speed on a highway, maybe we're getting enough there, maybe potentially between two distribution places or potentially in last mile. If you can get last mile, it's a significantly slower transport method, more options and more possibility for us to have that shipping device with our attacks in it closer to the facility. The problem that we may end up having is, quote, multipath. When we talk wireless about wireless signal taking multiple routes to a destination, we could still have the same problem with doing shipping. Is the shipping transport, whether it be last mile or between distribution to distribution center, always going to be the same? And that will vary depending on who the driver is, which the carrier is, what are the traffic situations, weather, you name it, as to how they're actually going to do that as well. So we may have shipped 100 packages to do test for location, and then that one time that we actually deliver the attack, it may take a different route because of something beyond our control. So trying to find some of that multipath stuff is interesting. All right. So sure, all of the it's going to end up at the place where we want it to. There are potentially multiple ways to get there, based on traffic, construction, multiple ways that we may want to have the tractor-trailer truck drive cross-country, airplanes, you name it. So we have some issues there. The last mile also becomes interesting too if you think about sort of how those folks deal with the last mile. I see the FedEx and UPS truck drive up and down my street all day long. I work from home, but some days he's going northbound and the other days he's going southbound, and it all depends on his route depending on where he's delivering packages. So that path for last mile is potentially going to change. Okay. Great. This is a really interesting package. I'm not sure exactly what's happening there. But this is the sort of the no-brainer for the recipient for the attack. The problem is that I know when I receive a package, it's usually like, oh my gosh, Christmas time, woohoo, it's my birthday, and I got all sorts of fun stuff, and I'm going to open that right away. Even if it was something for work, I want to see what's in the box, because that means I got toys. And so now we're potentially going to get discovered, so we have to start dealing with some of those other options for getting that left in the facility for some period of time. The question really becomes, if we're going to start launching attacks or determining this path-based stuff, is where the fuck are we, right? Where in the heck are we? And when do we know how to launch these attacks? Being able to determine some of this type of stuff in transit has some issues. Great, now once we're done, one of the primary pieces of software that I'm using for my solution is Kismet. Sure, why don't we go write our own Kismet plugin to deal with latitude and longitude location, specific SSIDs, BSSIDs that show up, and then launch our attacks based on that Kismet plugin. Sure, I don't have this done, and there's a reason for that, and we'll get to those reasons. So we took a different approach to this problem. Okay, we wanted infinite power. So we didn't ship a standard sort of base iPhone, Android phone, any of those types of things. We wanted to build our own custom solution, because if you think about it, what's the cost of a fairly modern iPhone or an Android device? You know, a couple $100, and if that doesn't come back to me, well, that tends to be an expensive proposition, especially if I have to do this multiple times. So we wanted an inexpensive solution that if it got lost, oh well. Based on potentially developing some of this custom solution, we had some significant challenges. All right, so we had some challenges. With a stock solution, great. It's got a battery. The battery life is not that great. We're having to add some other batteries. They're potentially expensive. What's the cost of a mobile device? The size is great. Okay, you know, we can put it in a really small box, maybe with some additional batteries as well, and it's already got GPS built in, also unfortunately at the cost of battery life. Excuse me. With a custom-built solution, we can make the battery life as good or as poor as we want, and I will show you some of that coming up here. We can do this very inexpensive with some off-the-shelf hardware. We can make this as large or as small as we want it to, depending on battery size as well. The problem is we run into GPS. There's no GPS currently. We have to add it on our own. And if you think about the way GPS is going to work for us, let's go take a GPS puck that needs to have a pretty good view of the sky, and then put that inside of a metal tractor-trailer truck. What does that do? It turns on that radio at high power when it can't see the sky, tries to obtain satellite signal, and then it comes out of the truck and goes into the big metal warehouse, and it does the same thing, and then it gets in the UPS FedEx van, which is also metal and doesn't have clear view of the sky, so it turns the radio on to high power, and there goes your battery life. So when we were sort of working on this solution, there was some definite issues with, hey, we put this really low power draw GPS puck on it, and our battery life went right in the toilet. It was horrible. So we had some issues about dealing with some of the hardware. So what we did, or created our own solution, which happens to be in this priority mailbox. Okay? We leveraged a Raspberry Pi B+, which is significantly less power drain, an Alpha AWS 051 NH card, so it does ABGN support, a charger and voltage converter, which was repurposed from a device to charge battery packs that I think I paid $1.24 from Deal Extreme. But you'll note nowhere that there is a GPS on this device. Turn this on. And I added the ability for us to do voltage monitoring. So this is going to turn on. We're going to fire up Kismet, and it's going to start finding networks and start logging some of the stuff as well. When it's finally powered all the way up, it'll draw about 440 to 430 milliamps with the wireless adapter on. Currently with the battery setup, and we'll talk a little bit about the batteries as well, this will run for 104.5 hours with some fairly modest battery calculation. It's a really good thing that with the United States Postal Service box that it's flat rate, because this thing is heavy. Okay. I mean, there are 30 18650 batteries on this thing, and this is lots of fun. TSA had lots of fun when I brought all these batteries in my check bag. So I spent a couple of days in Las Vegas for work right before coming here. The airport in Providence, when I flew to Vegas, had no issue. But when I had the red eye from Vegas here, the TSA agent gave me the 3rd degree and did the little special rubber glove treatment because I had 40 of these batteries in my carry-on bag. Because you can't put lithium-ion batteries under the plane, so I had to carry them on. Yeah, they didn't like that for some reason. I can't imagine why. Okay, so we're just about done booting up, and we're bouncing back and forth between 450 milliamps and 430 milliamps. So it's probably still doing a little boot up. So on the back, there is wireless adapter and Raspberry Pi B+. Okay. Yes, the wireless adapter doesn't have a case on it. When it came in, there were no screws in the case, and it basically just fell off. So quality control fail on that one. So, all right, I'll just leave the case off. All right, so yes, size matters. Okay, so not all of the shipping boxes from the various carriers are the same size. I designed this one to fit in the smallest of the about the same size boxes. We can now just add some extra shipping material around that. It's on a piece of plexiglass that I cut on my table saw in the workshop and drilled some holes in it so it has a handle, which I didn't round the edges on the handle, and when I had to carry it the 5 blocks over from the Spring Hill Suites this morning, full of suck, it was digging into my hand pretty bad. UPS has the largest form factor box of about this size from the United States Postal Service. The United States Postal Service fixed rate medium-sized box is the smallest in the class, so I went for the smallest size. Okay, so more power, all right? So size matters, that's what she said, and what if I told you that's not what she said? Okay. So the larger the package, the more battery we can put in it. In the case of the one that I brought with me, there is one sleeve, so to speak. There's no reason I couldn't add yet another sleeve to this box with just batteries and potentially triple the battery life. So 104.5 hours with the current 30 batteries. But potentially we can now pull that into the 300-hour range by just adding more batteries to the same box. Okay. These batteries were, again, we wanted to do this fairly inexpensively. They are lithium-ion rechargeable 18650 batteries, which I pulled for free. Free, you ask? Normally these things are about $2 a piece for the 220 milliamp hour batteries from China. So I happened to go to one of my old employers to say hi to some of my former coworkers, and I noticed at the front desk, at the admin assistant's desk, there's a box that says batteries for recycling. And just out of curiosity, I look in, and there's a bunch of old laptop batteries. Oh, some of the old Dell laptop batteries and some of the new laptop batteries, they have these 18650 cells in them, and half the reason why people are recycling the batteries, one cell out of maybe 12 is bad, which pulls down the voltage for the entire pack. If there's 12 cells in there and 1 or 2 is bad, great, go rip it apart, careful, you're going to cut yourself, and then pull all the cells out and find the ones that are still good. And you don't have to pay for them because they're free. In this case, they actually had to pay to have these batteries recycled, but they were doing the right thing. So by me removing these from their recycle bin, that was less that they had to pay for. And then I can take those to my local recycling center and not have to pay for them for the bad cells. So that was pretty darn good. I ended up having to build this device for DerbyCon, so there's a couple of things that have not been completed, which can have some definite safety things here. So I wanted to say thank you to one of my former coworkers, Jay Radcliffe. and some items that have come out of their Raspberry TV project by Alex Eames. Jay designed a power circuit for us to be able to deal with some power issues for this device. If you pull the battery voltage down on these batteries too far, they will start to go into destroy themselves mode and no longer work. So if we want to, when the voltage dips to a certain level, we want to power off the device so we don't destroy our batteries. Automatically shut down the device, save the batteries. Some other options too is that it has the ability for the circuit to do some thermal monitoring. So if the device gets too hot, we can shut that off and potentially avoid lithium-ion battery temperature runaway, which when that goes too far, those lithium-ion batteries catch on fire. And if you guys have ever seen a lithium fire, that's very energetic. And think about that sitting on the belly of an airplane, which is why you have to carry them on with you, or in a tractor-trailer truck for going cross-country. This is not something that you want to have happened and be blamed for. Okay, so we're working on that as well. Okay, so we've noticed that there is no GPS on this whole solution. Okay, real-time GPS would be killer. The problem is it affects battery life way too much. We took that 104.5 hour battery pack down to about 33 hours, and in some cases, depending on where it was located, even less. That's not very much time, especially if we're shipping this thing potentially cross-country, UPS ground, something of the like. You know, we're potentially talking a week worth of battery requirements, 210 plus hours. So reducing it that far using a real-time GPS becomes a problem. Okay, so how do we deal with some of that? And we'll talk about that. Some of the other software that we used was Kismet with just strictly XML output. They're fairly small, fairly easy to process, and we're going to talk about some tools for being able to deal with that. I did not capture PCAPs. Because the writing of the PCAPs is significantly larger, it has more battery requirement to write those to SD card. Now we're talking fairly large SD card or external USB, which is going to then add more power. And in many of the cases, I just want to know where this device has been, as opposed to actually capturing lots of traffic. The traffic, depending on that trip across country, may not be interesting to me. So I elected not to capture PCAPs. Okay. Attacks are currently sort of limited. Again, we haven't written the Kismet plugin to be able to do that. Do we want to have a second network card to be able to deliver those attacks? And now we're potentially talking some additional power requirements. The big one, again, is location. How do we deal with some of the location stuff? So how do we do GPS without GPS? Well, quite honestly, we can't. Unless we do some potential post-processing. If we get the SD card back with our Kismet XML plugins, or output on it, we can now potentially go and find where all these access points were discovered in transit, even though we had no GPS. Because someone knows where all of these are, either based on their SSID, their network name, or their BSSID, their wireless MAC address. So someone knows where these devices are. Wiggle is one of those places that knows where these are, both based on BSSID and SSID. The problem that I have with Wiggle is that it is all user submitted. It is not in real time, and in some of the cases the information is quite dated. My understanding is that they haven't dumped the database since they started. So it's a very large piece of history and time, and the information in the areas that you want are only as good as the last submission. And that last submission may have been 3 or 4 years ago. So you're based on what users are submitting. However, if you don't think that the big names like Google and Apple don't know where some of this stuff is from your mobile device. I have an iPhone. I turn on my iPhone, it says, if you're using location-based services, it can be better if you turn on your Wi-Fi. Why? Because they're listening to all the access point names and BSSIDs for all the stuff that are around it and putting those in a database and comparing that with the GPS latitude and longitude so they can do finer accuracy with all that stuff. They know about this stuff. So why don't we ask them? Okay. Great. So big thanks to the iSniff GPS project, who worked with a bunch of other folks to work with an undocumented Apple API call via HTTP to be able to take a BSSID, a wireless MAC address, and query Apple and have it return 400 access points in their locations, so that now we can have a map of 400 access points. Well, for my purposes, I don't want all 400 access points in their locations. I just want one. Okay. So that Kismet XML output has everything we need, even if it doesn't have the latitude and longitude. It has an SSID, it has a network name, and it has the wireless MAC address that we can now query potentially in combination, both Apple, using their undocumented API calls for their database, as well as an SSID. We can populate some maps as well. So I took upon my first Python project, and unfortunately, due to time constraints, some of the sort of last mile stuff, I had some help from some of my coworkers. Jay Radcliffe and I worked on this initially, and we've done a bunch more work to it since then. But I wanted to take sort of my approach to learning Python very much like Mr. Dave Kennedy did, and Dave Kennedy's first Python project was Set, and you see how that has turned out. Pretty damn cool. So hopefully I have some pretty damn cool some stuff by the time we're done. So the tool that we're going to release or releasing will read in Kismet XML output, read all of the BSSID, the wireless MAC addresses, and query Apple with their undocumented API call, retrieve the location, and then populate a Google map. So now we can start seeing these on a path. And that largely leverages some of the libraries for those undocumented API calls from the iSniff GPS project. Okay. And we've got that hosted up on GitHub. We have a couple of changes that we're ready to check in for some improvements, but didn't want to break any of the demos. All right, so let's tempt a unicorn. Okay. So let's see if we can actually do a demo here. And yes, I cheated. All right, so we're going to take okay, so it doesn't have a file path. Let's ask for some help. It wants a location of your Kismet XML and where, what the file name you want to write the map, and do you automatically want to open your results in a web browser. So I'm going to give it a location for an XML. I'm going to output that to DerbyCon HTML, and it is now attempting to go out to Apple, find a bunch of BSSIDs from that XML, querying Apple for the location, and populates those on a map. And Mr. Radcliffe, are you here? No, because he will recognize this, because this is some access points right around his house. I won't tell you which street he lives on, but it will now start populating the map with access points. And if we hover over those, it gives us the SSIDs as well. Now, this is a small sample so that you guys can sort of see this happen. It goes fairly quickly. But we can start running significantly larger samples. That one was only a couple of K. If we do it with this sample, this one is some user-submitted samples. I asked for some on Twitter. This one's someone who did a war drive from CMH. What airport code is that? Columbus, Ohio to Atlanta. So they war drove the entire trip, and didn't. The GPS latitude and longitude is in the file, but still we can do that by the BSSID as well. This file is 89 meg. The first one was a couple of K. So I'm probably going to stop this because this is going to be, highly not fun because it's going to sit here for a while, especially because the connection to go pull that stuff from Apple is going over my 4G connection. So we'll stop that. We'll see this whole long string of stuff. And when I first started creating some of these maps, we saw some very interesting things. So what we did at first, we took some of these and I started adding a path. So it would read the XML, we saw this first network, and we'll draw a line between each access point as it was found. Well, it turns out it's pretty darn inaccurate. And it's based all on the time that Kismet saw that. Some of the other stuff we found was actually kind of interesting as well. Okay. So great, let's go for a ship, go ship our device, retrieve the device, get our Kismet XML, net XML output, and then run this back through. Well, how do we get that XML? Maybe we put a GSM modem on it as well, and some specified intervals, have it wake up, upload that to us. Or maybe we get the package returned to us, returned to sender. Maybe we have it connect to an open wireless network and then upload that somewhere as well. But we want to make sure that we turn those back off so as not to affect battery life. Okay, and I made sure that I put these things up in case the demo failed. Okay, so some other interesting things we started talking about this stuff as well. We were like, hey, now we can do location-based stuff without knowing what location was, without latitude and longitude, without GPS. So going through Twitter, someone posted a pretty interesting image to Twitter about a TV show that was doing some stuff with hacking wireless networks. And I'm like, well, that's kind of interesting. So we're going to tempt some unicorns as seen on TV. And this image came from, I believe, a TV show called Mafia Alive. And this is a screen grab from Android playback on the device. And it's quite clearly a Mac, and they're doing some SSH they're stopping because it's not going to anywhere appropriate, some SQL queries, as well as having this little bar on the Mac pulled down on the side. Don't worry, I'm going to zoom in. So great. I think this is Brad Metzler's Decoded Mafia Live, Season 2, Episode 10, but we just have these SSIDs. Cartman, pretty common, Cisco 1, Cisco 2, Kenny, Look Public, PuppyNet, Red Brick, an iPhone of some things, EGN iPhone, but we've also got GGL Play, GGL Work, and GGL Work Second Floor. Like, well, that's kind of interesting. The problem is we've just got an SSID. The Apple undocumented API call only takes the wireless MAC address. So I've got the name but no MAC address from the screenshot. Well, I bet Wiggle knows what some of these are. So let's take the SSID and ask Wiggle if it knows what the MAC addresses are for these wireless networks. And sure enough, in some of the cases, they do. Hey, so let's do this. Let's do an SSID lookup for the GGL work. And we'll do that against Wiggle. It will ask Wiggle, do you know where this wireless access point is? Do you know what the BSSID is? Sure, then take the BSSID and then query Apple for that. We have a -C. In order for this to work, in order for us to be able to query Wiggle's database, it requires a session cookie, which you can get from your browser as authenticating. And I'm going to give this session, this token away. It's set to not expire for 10 years. So go ahead and use it. And I think if I remember correctly, the reason why I'm giving it away is I accidentally already uploaded it to GitHub. So yeah, it's a good thing I created this account specifically for doing this, so oh darn. But you guys will be able to use this. You can either define this in code, or if you want to use your own session cookie, you can actually define this in the Python as well. Okay, so let's see if this will work. It's going to go query Wiggle, and it is going to look for the GGL work networks, bring the BSSIDs, the MAC addresses for those back, and then query Apple for those locations. It found 2 and gives us the latitude and longitude for those locations. Now we can, of course, the work to be done here is to have it automatically open a map, but we can in fact drop those into Google Maps, and sure enough, there is a special effects warehouse called LookEffects at this particular address. So it was done at LookEffects. Okay. Pretty cool. I thought that was kind of fun. All right. Another one I wanted to mention too that I kind of forgot. If we want to look up, so we've got Kismet NetXML. Great. We've got a whole bunch of networks. What happens if we want to do just one? We've also got one that just does lookup, and we're going to have this also add to a map. So we can just look up a single one by defining a MAC address with yet another tool on the command line. And this is the MAC address for one of the access points over at the Spring Hill Suites about 5 blocks from here. And it will, again, return the latitude and longitude for a single specific BSSID. So that tool will also be in GitHub. Great. So some fun stuff on TV, yeah, and LookEffects is a special effects warehouse that was dealing with all the screening for this particular attack. How about this one? This is a pretty interesting screenshot. This comes from CBS's person of interest, for those of you who've watched that show, they sort of have the computer, quote, hacking aspect to that. They did a good job. They created a bunch of networks, and with the tool that they used, they obfuscated the MAC addresses. For example, if we look at the Kalatu Barada 1951 SSID, the MAC address is 0053TY1799QQ. Yeah, a MAC address that cannot exist because they're not valid hex. And I thought, well, what if we can just brute force all of those lookups? Well, then maybe we can actually find out whether this is legitimate or not. So great. Let's now go do some brute force. Now, let's do the short one first. So this will do, in fact, it will go to Apple and look up every one of the MAC sections that are marked with an X. It will brute force the entire contents, possible values for that. Using 2C, E6, CC, 3E, 5.8, and the last octet, or the last section being all possible values. This is also the one from the Spring Hill Suites down the street where I'm staying. And we'll note that we start seeing a bunch of access points, and they're all in very similar locations. And multiple, hopefully populated across multiple stuff. And we start going through this, and we say, hey, these are all very similar. They're all from the same manufacturer. They're all from the same sort of run, and we can now determine potential shipping patterns and where some of these things were distributed through various resellers and that type of stuff. So some other stuff that we can do is, why don't we say brute force a whole bunch? The maximum that we have the tool set to be able to brute force is 3 sections of the MAC address. So conceivably, we could brute force all unique devices per assigned OUI for a manufacturer and determine where all of their access points were installed. Now, we give you a nice little message. You do realize this is going to take forever, right? We ran one and it took about 8 hours. So no, I'm not going to make you sit here for 8 hours, but it will start returning some pretty interesting stuff as things go along. Again, some of the updates for the GitHub updates are to be able to take all of this output that gives us latitude and longitude and also populate some Google Maps as well. So it's coming. I just ran out of time. Great. So I thought that was pretty neat for us to now potentially be able to go and brute force all possible install locations observed by Apple devices for all sorts of various manufacturers, and be able to take stuff from TV and have fun with that as well. Okay. All right. So that was the demo. So we went from demo 1 to taunting the unicorns, and then taunting the unicorns on TV, and now, well, just the unicorns, right? But of course, that is a very sexy man right there. Thank you, Mr. Dave Kennedy. Okay. All right, so now we potentially have some benefits to some of these tools. We can now brute force sequential BSSIDs and for specific manufacturers. Yes, we are now, in fact, friends with benefits. Yes. So the way I find images for my slides is I take the title of the slide, I add the images after the fact, and I go to Google Image Search, and I take the title of the slide, put it in Google Image Search, and pick the fun image that shows up. And this happened to be the one that showed up for that. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Okay, so this is an example of it being bad. Okay. This one was someone going and drawing GPS paths while on a run and decided that they'd have fun and draw big hairy cock and balls. Yep, that's awesome, isn't it? Yeah. So we talk about, when I started doing some of the stuff, I made a path for some of these fairly large captures. In one of the cases, some of the user-submitted captures were a couple of years old, and that's cool. I needed something to test the tool with. So I took all of the spots, and every time it found the next access point, it would add a spot on the path. And because some of these were a little bit older, what we discovered was they'd be finding these access points along a highway, and then one would jump to Scotland. And the next one would come back to the highway, and then down to South America, and then back, and then from, like, just as they get to Atlanta, there's one in Boston, and then back almost to Atlanta, and then California. And what I surmised was happening was because the data as captured was a little bit older, And now we're actually doing pseudo real-time querying against devices that have been discovered that people have taken their access points with them and put them in a new location. So now we can potentially track people where they almost used to be to where they are now. I removed the path thing just because it took more time for processing and, well, was kind of inaccurate, but had some interesting output given that we could observe that now over a significant period of time, people had moved and taken their access point with them. In some of those cases, I noted that they took them to places where the regulatory domain had changed and they were actually potentially using those access points on channels that were against the law in those countries. So that became kind of interesting. Great. So yeah, guess who moved and guess who also knows about that? Apple. All right. So looking at some of this stuff and looking at the output, of course, Kismet also records all of the Wi-Fi security. And, well, yes, folks are still using web. And we get it. You know, sometimes you've got those devices in your environment that just can't be upgraded. The prime example that I like to give is when folks bought computers built into some of these forklifts in, say, manufacturing and shipping plants. That forklift ends up on a 30-year amortization schedule. And because the computer's 5 years old, you just can't go and buy a new forklift because it's still got 25 years left on its amortization schedule. So you're stuck with this hunk of junk that can only do web. I get it. But this whole web thing has sort of been is a dead horse that we've kicked multiple times. I mean, this stuff's broken, so let's get over it. There are still lots of folks that are using WPA, and more specifically WPA2 with TKIP. Now, TKIP was intended to be the Band-Aid solution. Hey, oh my God, this web thing is broken. We need to improve this. Great, here's your Band-Aid. And in a 5-year period, we are going to fix this TKIP RC4 problem with this new solution, WPA2 with AES CCMP. So we're going to have a 5-year lifetime on this whole TKIP stuff. The problem is that 5-year lifetime for WPA with TKIP or WPA2 with TKIP essentially expired in 2007. We're now 7 years later, and people are still using TKIP. How many of you guys have devices in your environment? You don't have to answer this, but have devices in your environment that are older than 7 years old that are still on your wireless networks? Yeah, there are going to be some of you. But largely, by the time 2002 rolled around, you were likely buying devices that would support WPA2 specifically with AES CCMP. So we're talking potentially a period of 13 years. Yeah. Ouch. And there are going to be limited cases where that's just not going to be able to be the case. So yeah, there are still folks that are leveraging TKIP in their network. TKIP was left in WPA2 to be backwards compatible for those devices that wouldn't support anything else. So stop using it. And there are lots of folks still out there using it. All right, so how do we defend against some of this type of stuff? Well, there's always the creepy FedEx guy. Okay. This one apparently does have your specialty delivery right here. So this is one of the opportunities when you do the Google image search and you search not for defenses but for creepy delivery guy. Yeah, I had to add FedEx or UPS to that to get something actually decent. Okay. So how do you find when these things end up in your environment? Well, you could have all your mail opened at the mailroom, or maybe we can have some other testing such as those that they do with TSA for explosives. Yeah, we probably can't afford any of that type of stuff, and it may be a little bit of overkill. How about doing some other potential detection as opposed to opening packages? How about we start looking at EM signatures coming from packages with active electronics in it? Maybe they have that little hum. Yeah, you probably can't afford to do that either, depending on where you are. So we're kind of stuck for some of the defenses. I did want to sort of give some credit to the EFF. When Jay Radcliffe and I initially started this project, we actually queried the EFF about the legality of a project such as this. And we've seen some controversy about the EFF and that they're not willing to help out. But I have, in fact, have had a really great conversation with folks at the EFF. And quite honestly, they kept me out of jail on probably more than one occasion by asking them about the project beforehand. And in the case of this one, we did ask the EFF about what would be some of the consequences or not of shipping one of these devices cross-country. And they came back after a couple of weeks and said, yes, this is in fact against federal law. And it's not so much against federal law about doing the Wi-Fi sniffing and capturing location and some of those types of things. The law specifically in question is that for shipping active electronics and violating postal rules. You'll note whenever you buy a UPS and it gets shipped to you, they have that interrupt that has to be unplugged. The batteries in your laptops are never into the laptops, or they're not supposed to be when they come from the manufacturer or from the distributor, because it's against the law to have those batteries sort of in a power-up or potential power-up situation. Again, largely due to safety, so that we don't have that thermal runaway and have an airplane catch on fire or something of the like as well. So the EFF have advised us, don't ship this stuff, because if you ship the stuff and it's powered on, what happens if it catches on fire in some UPS delivery guy's truck and the poor guy dies? Well, guess who's liable? Well, we are. And we didn't want that to happen, because I do enjoy spending time with my family. I do enjoy going outdoors from time to time. Yeah, I also don't enjoy spending time in prison, because that doesn't sound like a whole lot of fun. But unfortunately, because we can't do it legally and or ethically, and I don't want to go to jail, and nor do I want to have my company or my friends who work for said company liable for something like that, it becomes a significant challenge to test ethically. However, for those that are willing to break a few laws, this isn't a problem. And if they don't care about breaking any laws, then great. They can still go and ship one of these packages with active electronics, and great, I broke a law, I'm going to break a law by breaking into your computer networks anyway, so what's one more, right? It's still federal prison either way if I get caught, so what's the big deal? So they can still do it. The problem is we really don't have any accurate way to test any of this stuff legally. Okay, so how to stay out of the jail. Okay, so this is a prison uniform from the lovely state of Arizona, where they dress their prisoners in pink instead of orange, because it's allegedly supposed to be humiliating. Okay, so how to stay out of jail unless you don't care. We're specifically looking at, the Wi-Fi sniffing is, to the best of our knowledge in all of the court cases that have happened, as advised by the EFF, is that the sniffing is in fact legal. And also determining the location post-processing is also legal as well. However, the shipping of active electronics is highly illegal and potentially has some life safety issues. So, what do? You get permission to actually ship this stuff from the federal government? Yeah, good luck with that. Or actually put it in a car and go do a simulated warship and go for a drive. Okay, so wrapping up right about time, and Adrian's issue with the projector was good. So a couple of conclusions. We don't really need GPS to do GPS location tracking, as long as we can do some post-processing after the fact. The problem, and it does save the battery, but it still gives us some other challenges that we have to deal with after the fact. And the other problem is that doing some of this auditing from an ethical perspective is highly illegal and potentially causes some life safety issues for those folks that are transporting that stuff. However, doing some simulations, driving that stuff around is perfectly okay. Okay, so thank you guys for coming. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your DerbyCon. If you want to get a hold of me or take a look at these slides afterwards, go look at the video recording. We'll have this stuff up as well. And the Python tools for doing sort of the location determination after the location and doing some of the lookups and the brute force are on GitHub. At github.com/hacksofthematrix/loc-no-GPS. And we're still actively developing some of those tools. We got a couple of those other features that I mentioned that have not been added to the tools, or have been added to the tools but just haven't been pushed to the repo yet, largely because of one of my coworkers did that, and he's in Amsterdam teaching a class at the moment. So big thanks for Mr. Dom Weber Cutaway for doing that. Okay. So also we tempted the unicorns a couple of times, so He-Man on a flying unicorn, your argument is invalid. That is in fact not a unicorn. So fail on that one. That is in fact either an alicorn or a pegacorn or a unipeg, depending on which fantasy world that you want to live in. Yeah, it's kind of sad that I know that. I have an almost 7-year-old daughter, and she knows that because of course her favorite show, My Little Pony. Yeah, so I think I'm like a closet brony and don't know it. So yeah, I probably shouldn't admit that. All right, so thank you all for coming. Please do enjoy the rest of your DerbyCon. Hey, Nick. Hey, Nick.